Hey everyone, welcome back to the Retro Regamer channel. So I thought it was fitting that I do a video talking about my predictions and some of my interest around the Switch 2 that's about to come out, mainly because the first video I ever uploaded onto this channel was my reaction and my predictions for the original Switch. Nintendo back 8 years ago, there was some debate actually out there of, is this going to be a good system? Is it actually going to be what we want? Is it going to be fun? Are there actually going to be good games for it? Is it just like a souped up 3DS? Are they going to have to do two systems? Like what's the deal? Is it going to be, are we going to have a dedicated system and then a portable system? Or are we going to get a portable system and then later Nintendo's going to release a dedicated system? All this stuff. There's lots of conjecture and back and forth. I would say it's felt very much like 50-50 at the time of people being like, it's going to be great, it's going to be amazing, Nintendo is really killing it, and other people being like, they're idiots, what are they doing? Why don't they follow the formula they've been doing in the past? Like they're going to tank, like this is not going to work. So I was one of the former. I thought this is great. I think it's going to be successful. I was excited about the Nintendo Switch. I loved that it felt like Nintendo was being innovative again in a new way. They were being bold, and they were taking a chance. And sometimes when they've done that, it hasn't worked out for them. But I thought that was going to work out. I was like, I think the Switch is a good idea. I think it's going to land. Yes, there's not a lot of great software titles at launch. That was another thing that people talked about. I covered ones that I thought were going to be great and that, they were going to do a good job with. And then some of those did not turn out to be so great. But, they did do their best, and we did get some good ones. And then as soon as some more of those started pumping through the system, we got there's some great games on the system and still more great ones coming out for the system. Pretty excited. So I'll link to that one if you haven't checked out that first video. Just be warned, it's a lot of clutter in the background. This is still clutter, but at least it looks like nice games and stuff. It's not just a bunch of boxes. And I had longer hair, as well as probably a little bit less gray. So yeah, I look a little bit different, changed a little bit in 8 years. It's fair. But yeah, so check that one out if you haven't seen it. I would say skip to around the 7-minute mark. That's when I go more into my thoughts on my predictions for it and if I think it's going to be successful or not. But spoiler alert, like I already gave you, I said I thought it was going to be successful, and I felt like people were crazy, and I was like, screw the naysayers. I think it's going to be amazing. And I'm willing to bet on it. And I think that bet paid off. I think it was a very successful system. I'll still say that I felt like that system in particular was one of the few times in my life where I feel like I've played a game and had this sense of like awe kind of and wonder around a new experience with that game or with that hardware. And so to give you an example of what I mean, like the first time I remember something like that was with the Nintendo 64 and Super Mario 64, which first like big 3D Mario game that came out with the N64 was launch title. I remember going to a Toys R Us. They had a N64 kiosk there and playing, like going up, seeing Mario's floating head and then the Super Mario 64 logo dropping down and looking 3D, and I was like, oh, that's cool, and then going into the game and then suddenly seeing Mario, all sides of Mario turning around in a circle, walking around a pipe, walking around a block or a question block, like jumping in the water and swimming, like and like back and forth, like and around, it blew my mind as a child. Like I was like, holy crap, like how is this? This is so cool. Like I had never seen anything like this in a game, and I'm controlling it. Like I've seen movies and videos and stuff obviously like that, but to control a game character like that, like, whoa, this is wild. I know there was some other 3D stuff out, but I never really experienced any of that or had really interacted with much of it. So they're, they weren't necessarily the first to do some of those 3D things, but that was the first experience I had. I didn't have a system or console growing up until I got a Game Boy Color. I had never really experienced something like that, so that was wild to me. But that gave me this sense of like wonder and connectedness to the game and to the hardware and to the characters. And I haven't had that happen too often throughout my gaming career. I would say I can think of one or two other times where something similar happened, but the next one that I thought of that came to mind for specifically with Nintendo was the Switch. When the Switch came out, I remember a few days after getting it and playing Breath of the Wild. It was so wild to me, pun, to be like, whoa, I'm like playing a game that normally I would have had to play on a console that was plugged up to a TV with a controller, but I'm just carrying it around. And it was just this weird kind of surreal moment where I was like, wow, this is wild. Like, so it was really neat. And then I could go dock it, and then boom, it's up on my 55-inch TV, and I can get a controller and play, and it's the exact same everything, the same experience. And then I can undock it, and it was wild. It was a wild thing to be able to do. I had never really experienced something like that. I had played lots of handheld games, and I felt like there was always this disparity between handheld games and the console games of that generation. They were always not, as good colors, not as good sound, not as big a screen, all that stuff, I guess the closest would have been something like a Sega Nomad, where you could go grab the cartridge from your Genesis and plug it in, but I didn't know anybody that had one of those. I have one now as an adult, and it is super cool, and I love that I can plug in Genesis games and play it, but the Switch was just like a whole new world to me. And it really felt like a surreal moment. Are we going to get that again with the Switch 2? I don't know. I don't think it's going to be quite to that level. At least I don't feel that way. I hope I'm surprised by that. I feel like, maybe there's for me, maybe it's a 50-50 chance. We'll see. Maybe there will be an experience like that. And maybe, I think the hardware that they're coming out with and all that looks like it's going to be amazing. And maybe there will be that moment that feels like that again, with a specific game title that comes out or something cool that they do. Like, I really kind of like the idea of the gaming together. The thing I thought of with their like gaming together thing, where you could see screens, even though it's like really low resolution, little tiny things, is like they're kind of giving you away in the modern digital era to game like you used to on split screen with like a CRT. You've got your 4 friends down there, and a friend of mine made a comment of like, it kind of sucks that it, that takes up part of the screen, and that's true, it does. And then I was thinking, well, back in the day, we'd have a 21-inch TV that would get split into 4, and you'd end up with a whatever that is, a 7-inch or 6-inch section of the TV that was your piece. So, you still get a good chunk of real estate. So it's kind of cool that they give you that idea. They're doing that idea, and they've implemented the chat and potentially the video features. We'll see how well all of that works. I think if anything's going to fill that sense of like, oh, this is cool kind of moment, I think it would probably be that, honestly. I don't know. I will see. Maybe I'll do another video and talk about it afterwards, but that might, or, if there's a game, like a really crazy intense game, or, that comes out for it and you can play it. And, Metroid looks awesome. The new DK game looks great. Like, I'm really excited to play a lot of the titles that are coming out on the system. The new Mario Kart looks amazing. I love the kind of free roam idea too, of moving in between worlds and exploring in between tracks and things like that. So I think they really kind of put their effort in again to like, how do we enhance this and how do we make this better? And I read through the developer review thing and the developer Q&A on Nintendo site. Highly recommend you read through that. I thought it was really cool and insightful in the way that they approach things and think about it. I used to love reading that. There were some old ones from some of those from like Super Nintendo era and N64, where like Miyamoto or some of the other designers would talk about the concepts of how they developed a game or how they thought through something. And I appreciate that a lot. You can kind of see the care and effort that's going into it. So I think Switch 2 is going to be great. I think the $450 price point for it is amazing. I think the $500 with the Mario Kart pack-in is a great idea. Not a huge fan of the pricing for the digital games, standalone and the physical games. I think $80 for digital Mario Kart or for other digital games seems a little too high. I think honestly more in that like 65, 75 range for digital, like, or 70. Stick with kind of what's there in the market. We already had kind of this raise a few years ago, like. So that, and then even more for a physical copy, like 80, 90 range for that feels crazy to me. Maybe that will ebb and flow some, we'll see. But that feels a little high. I would have liked to see most of it just stay around $70, for physical, and maybe even like 60 for digital, because you don't have the plastic and the cards and all the, stuff that comes along with physical. But I don't know. We'll see. I'm really curious to see how that goes. I also would have loved a pack-in game. I think they should have made that little Explorer game a pack-in game. I think a lot of people are saying that. Paying $6 or $7 for that seems silly. Like, that's a great way to get people to just explore around and play around with your system who maybe don't get the Mario Kart pack-in and just get the original system and don't necessarily want to go out and pay $80 right after that for a system. They can play with the little pack-in, explore my system, and they can just soak that in for a little bit. I think that would have been a better way to go, but that's their choice. Or have a way where people can use their Nintendo Platinum or Gold points on the site to get the little explore the system game, kind of thing. I think that would have been cool too, but it is what it is. We'll see if they change their mind on any of it, but I may still get it for $6, but I know several people that already told me, like, I'm not buying that because, the other people will talk about it. I don't feel like I have to have that. I think it just would have been a nice, fun thing for people to have day one, kind of, if they didn't pick up a system, or if they're new to the Switch ecosystem. They may not have old Switch games they could play. Not all of them are compatible. They're still working on a lot of compatibility. There is a lot of compatibility out there, but they're still in progress. And hopefully by launch, they're going to be well into the compatibility, so there won't be hopefully too many issues with like old Switch games playing on them as well. So anyway, that's kind of my thoughts on that. From a prediction standpoint, I think it's going to sell well. I think it's going to do a great. I love that it's a 1080p handheld with 120 frames per second. I love the magnetic Joy-Cons, and the mouse feature I think is kind of cool. I'm waiting to see how they do that. I can't tell. It feels kind of gimmicky. It feels like it might be that gimmicky thing that like not a lot of developers jump in on. They haven't talked about surfaces for it. I'm kind of expecting a mouse pad again. I might have to break out my my Mario Paint mouse pad and use that with it. We'll see how it goes, but I'm curious what kind of ideas that come out with that and what kind of third-party stuff comes out. I think it's a neat idea. I think it's cool. I'm curious to see what they do with that, or if it kind of just becomes one of those things that they put in there but nobody really uses or takes advantage of. The camera, the chat feature thing, I think that's a good addition. I like being able to play cooperatively. I like being able to chat through the system. I think that's cool, being able to see the screen of someone else that you're playing. Love the game share thing again. I can't remember if that's exactly what they're calling it, but the whole game share of, if I have the game and other people in the room with the system, several games I'm going to be able to share the game with them, and we're all going to be able to play together even if they don't own the game. That to me helps make that price point a little bit better. If the games like if Mario Kart is one of those games, like if I go buy Mario Kart or get it with my system for $80, and then I can play that with, other Switch 2 owners, probably can't play it with other Switch owners, but, and we could play a couple tracks together without having to, all of them have bought it or paid $80 for it or whatever. That would be cool. I think that would make the price point a little more palatable. Not much, but a little bit. So that's my 2 cents on that piece. So those are my thoughts. Those are kind of some of my predictions. I think, I think there's going to be a lot of cool stuff come from it. I think we're going to see a lot of great games, a lot of stuff that couldn't come to the Switch or was limited on the Switch. I think now they're just going to go full on into it with the Switch 2. I love, that a lot of the teams and developers and stuff that probably have worked on the Switch, are probably way in process now, already gearing up and going to have so many things for the Switch 2. I watched a couple things from developers who are excited to play around with different things on the system, excited for more capabilities. So I'm really, looking forward to all of that. So there's my thoughts on it. I think it's good. I think it's going to sell probably pretty decently. I don't think it's going to blow the doors off, kind of in the same way that the Switch did, because I think at least initially, a lot of people probably feel comfortable with where they are with the Switch. I think the hardcore gamers, the people that have been looking for this for a while and are ready to, game on something new, are really going to jump all over this. And I think there's going to be a lot there. But I think a lot of the casual gamers are probably going to still stay in the Switch Lite or the Switch, and probably be more of a slow move into that. If we come out with a Switch 2 Lite or a Switch 2 OLED or whatever, I think that's probably going to pull in a lot more of the casual people, casual players, and all of that, later on down the road. So, but I love what Nintendo did. I'm glad they gave us this. I'm glad they didn't just scrap the Switch 2 or the Switch Pro or Super Switch idea that they did here, and give us something completely new and different, because I loved the Switch, and I think it's great. I think it's great they just improved on that. I think it's great they added features to that. Maybe the next generation, they give us something totally new again and try to blow our minds again. Cool. But I'm glad they just kind of stayed similar in the Switch vein, with a lot of improvements and enhancements, and we get to still have that portability. We get to still have that amazing dockable experience now with the 4K and everything. That's super cool. I love all that. I do hope the battery life is good. I've seen mixed reviews on that. I am a little bit concerned about it. I'm really hoping that because of the size and everything, they're able to give us a little bit more battery life. But with that, they also had increased drain from the, newer tech and the bigger screen. It's not an OLED screen. I'm kind of bummed about that. I really thought they would give us a base model with an OLED screen. So I'm kind of sad about that. I know it probably would have made the system at least, $50 more. I was willing to go up to around 500 for the base system. I think that was my cutoff point, was $500 for the base system. So to get it for 450, but in this case, be able to add, have the Mario Kart pack in as well, and get that for 500. That's great. I think if the base system had launched at anything higher than $500, I was probably out initially. Honestly, I was probably going to wait a little bit and see. So I'm really glad they brought that in a little lower. I think that probably is keeping a lot of people interested and able to kind of hit that point, especially where we are today in gaming and all that. I think that's a good price point. So we'll see what happens. But anyway, so drop your comments below what you think. Are you excited for the Switch 2? Are you planning to pick it up? Any particular games that you're excited for, or experiences that you're looking forward to or think are a good idea, maybe a bad idea? Let me know what you think, and drop that in there. I'll try to link to my old video, the first one that I mentioned before, if you want to check that out as well. And thanks for joining in. Thanks for listening to me talk and go through a little bit of my thoughts on the Switch 2, and we'll see what happens once it launches.